In today's episode, Nancy and I talk about multiple timelines and dimensions and how they are crossing in order to offer us an opportunity to grab the best of who we have been, will be, are being, so that we can assimilate into one form and one awareness aligned in what we call this timeline to create a future that leads not only us, but the collective into a more loving experience in which all of our needs are met in a really good way.
Welcome to Expansive Minds Podcast, Gateway to Freedom, a podcast where two friends, Aileen and Nancy, explore and expand beyond what they think they know in order to live a life of freedom. Thank you for joining us, and away we go. Hello.
Hi, Nancy.
What's happening, girlfriend? A lot, hence the chuckle.
Woo!
A lot.
Here I am in sweatpants and clogs.
All right, we want to hear about it. So let me do our intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
let's
let's
talk about what we're gonna talk
hear about it. Yeah. So I was thinking, with respect to setting the intention, sound, hearing so much from my spiritual teachers about sound and frequency and the importance of it, that our intention, in addition to hanging out, just two friends who adore each other, our intention of this show and all the shows is that the sound that we're putting out into the atmosphere is simply by the frequency of it and the intention behind it, we aim to please. We aim to uplift and find joy in this moment and all moments forward. And so it is.
So it is.
So yeah,
Nice.
we just want to have fun while we're talking, and let that be behind all the words, regardless of what the words are.
Exactly.
So yeah, you had a busy
appreciate
time getting here.
I did. It was great. I mean, it was a great busy morning, and that made me think about something we could talk about, which is timelines.
Time is an illusion.
It is. And a lot of people that have gone through a crisis, dark night of the soul, spiritual awakening, one of potentially the most dominant things that comes out is the question of what is time. And that was true for me. I was like, what is time? And it often is the issue. What is time? And time is an illusion. And we have created simultaneously linear time. Like we have moving forward, what's behind us, all of that. And yet, we have lots of evidence that time is not linear.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting way to try to live in some reality, which is what is time? Does it loop back on itself? Does it like, what does it do? And so in conversations of even when we say, oh, that was a past life experience, there's a concept that it's simultaneously happening. It's not past.
So is it safe, just to make sure I'm understanding, are we equating timelines with dimensions?
I absolutely
Can I use that interchangeably?
I think that we can.
Whatever words maybe make you understand, because now we're going with the concepts here now.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So multiple timelines are multiple dimensions.
Right. So there's lots of dimensions. And some people, like Dolores Cannon, say that every time we make a decision, one of us goes this, like one of us lives that one. So every person kind of almost like in your mind, you're like, oh, I dated these people. I'm still actually with those people in another timeline. But I've chosen in this timeline, which we call 2023, but that's also just Gregorian calendar, because there's the Chinese and the Jewish, there's lots of different calendars, I'm just saying, for the Gregorian one. So we say this is 2023, and so I'm choosing to stay on this timeline. Mostly. However, which is what I wanted to talk about, is timelines have crossed over and and really I think they're profoundly crossing over now for a really clear specific purpose. So if people are feeling like they're their memories are more like active and juicy and
Deja vu? What's deja vu, that concept?
Well, deja vu to me is something a little different than a timeline script.
Okay.
I think deja vu is a simultaneous knowing.
Okay.
It could be similar, but a little different than what I'm talking about. Although it's all probably clumped into the same, like energy moment. You know what I mean? It's like an energy moment that they were like, oh, you know. So I think what we're doing is being our own Dr. Frankenstein and creating our own Frankenstein, which means that we have multiple timelines, parallel, past, future. Doppelgangers is a word. It's like you, another one of you somewhere else. Yeah. And then we get into intergalactic. So we're talking not even just like, oh, here's an Aileen that sort of looks like this. I mean, there's some Marvel has been doing some great stuff with multiverses and like all the different men, women, creatures, right?
The Benedict one in the multiverse. Yes. That.
Oh yeah,
multiverse.
Are you talking about Doctor Strange?
Yeah.
So there's lots, everything, everywhere, all the time. Like there's really, because they were like, we get it. It's not just like Trekkies anymore, you know. And so our consciousness is all things. And then you might say when it slows down to perpetuate an experience of like touching, listening,
so the frequencies
sensing.
get slower to make a density, a tactile density versus the waves. Like
in a particular dimension.
Yes, okay.
Right, then there's a sense of form.
Okay.
To experience form reality.
Yep.
Now remember, form reality, if you're a whale, your form reality a lot of times is water.
Okay. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we can't even get into like, form reality is earth, air, sky. And it's like, no, form reality could you also coexist as some plasma thing on some other planet moving through the hot surface. Yeah, you could. So
now you're confused. Now I'm like, what? But
because well, it's no different than thinking maybe perhaps we're aliens or we're like, oh, I'm from Atlantis or I'm from this. What about Pleiadian? Like, what about all of the grays? What about if you're looking at aliens or what we call, extra whatever, terrestrial? So the concept is consciousness is ever expanding. Consciousness is all shared. The vibration slows down, becomes focused, purposeful, meaningful as a way to experience.
Yep.
Whatever atmosphere, whatever environment
that's what
that it wants to.
Bruce Lipton has said, because people say, we spend all this time meditating and trying to get like up here and instead of being here, and why didn't we just stay up there? And he said, and when people ask me that question, I say, well, if you're way up here, how do you know what chocolate tastes like? Mm-hmm. You have to be in this other lower level frequency density in order to experience those senses. And then what Abraham would say is then from those senses and circumstances, you now identify what you like and what you don't like. And that's expansion, other than just kind of hanging out in this steady state.
And maybe we can say instead of lower or higher, because I think people can get really judgy about that, it's just slower and faster.
Yeah, agree. Yeah. Agree. The waveforms slow down.
Right, exactly. And so to that, what I think is happening right now is we've done such a good job blowing open as safely as we can the concept of linear time. It's like we meditate. Like there's all things we're doing to get ourselves out of this linear time attachment. I believe that we are releasing all of the slower vibrations that we might equate to things like anger or depression or guilt. Some of those, if we look at Dr. Emoto's work from Japan, right, on the water. Right? So if we are releasing those vibrations attached to emotions, reactions, that would cause a deformity or a bond to woundedness that then could lead to acting out and harmfulness to the collective. I think we're all choosing to get rid of that in multiple versions of ourselves.
That is so beautifully put. You just nailed that. Just, yeah, well done. Yes.
And then we are, so as that's going, it creates a void and an opening and a choice to then call in and assimilate and wholly align to the best selves that we have been in all of these timelines, as well as lineage and ancestral.
So the choice is,
to then create this ultimate us.
but like, would there be an instance to not to choose no, if they don't want to continue, or would that be?
Oh, you mean if we quote unquote die?
Yeah.
Or
So
we mean-
what choices? What are the two choices? We go toward the more ultimate self, or we don't.
Oh, true, or you
like-
don't, and we hope that eventually you will. So what I always sort of think about if you're popping popcorn in a pan, not every kernel's popping at the same time. So I think the focus is for those of us who are like really viscerally feeling, like I'm not going to be in that space where those people are speaking that way.
Less of a threshold, less of a tolerance for.
Yeah, and we don't engage in it. It's like we're not going to
Negative.
fight them.
Yeah.
We're just like, oh, I'm going to leave the space right now. I'm okay. I'm neutral. I'm unharmed. I'm
I
just
think a
gonna leave
lot
the
of
space.
people have done that already, and I think the whole shutdown caused us to get a little more introspective and make some decisions like that. And where I feel, I don't know if this goes in with your theory that timelines are crossing, myself and folks around me are really looking for their tribe. Looking for people that they can feel a connection with again, looking to feel that aliveness of the community again.
So we're going to move past that, which is because then we're still looking external. If our focus is to be Dr. Frankenstein in our own laboratory with ourselves,
Okay.
that's the high, that's the juice, that's the thrill. Because if we're in multiple dimensions, we don't need to find our tribe here because we got a tribe in like
Every dimension.
It's like, oh, I can feel the energy of the tribe person I was with in 1827, and I can feel the connection to the tribe member who's purple and has 5 arms in another galaxy.
I got nothing.
Yes. So
Okay.
it's not about, so if we're moving to this like really rapid vibration,
Yes.
right? Where we might call it like bliss, love, or like energy stone, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have a session and you're just like, oh, like it was not chemically based, but you're just like, I'm so stoned, like just because you're like,
Happy bliss.
Yes,
Bliss is
total
the
happy
perfect word,
bliss,
yeah.
right? So that's the energy of it. That's the energy of it.
Okay.
And in that situation, like when you were talking about the sound, right? And the importance of the sound, the awareness, intentionality of the sound.
Sound being frequency.
Being frequency.
That we then translate as sound. It's kind of like that. If a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? That was the very first philosophy 101 in college. And the answer is no. It makes a frequency with the ears, then translate
Yes,
to
it
sound.
has to come through the ear. Yeah, this has a whole thing that it does. And the other thing I say to people to explain sort of how things and why things are in our life in a lot of ways is, I'm going to take the dog whistle and just like pull it out a little bit more. There's a concept like the dog whistle, boom, and humans can't hear it, just dogs' ears can hear it. Well, what if you had a dog whistle for every breed, and you'd be like, okay, I would like a German Shepherd to come, boop, only a German Shepherd hears it, only boop, a golden doodle or whatever hears it like a beagle, right? So when we're creating our Dr. Frankenstein, creating our Frankenstein, every time we drop one of these more harmful vibrations and emotions, anybody and everybody that was called to that, like, beep, they go with it. Like,
Right.
see ya. And then every time you pull in the doppelganger who was like, am, you know, having this great existential divine experience on a mountaintop, all those people and beings and consciousness is attracted to you. So in energy, we often talk about, like, if we're in our wounded place, I mean, one of the cool things is we can also attract and be in the muddle and the muck of all the other people that are wounded in that same way. And to that point, when we process that and we heal, the people that are about to and want to heal that will find us.
Gotcha.
Right.
So
So
the
if
way
you get
we're
really positive, you'll be with your tribe all the time. Plus, it won't matter because you're so happy.
right. So the way we do this, create our Frankenstein
Yeah.
in the lab,
Yep.
is how to, as you move through the day, the way we get our timelines to mingle with the ones
Well, they
that
are
desire.
already.
They're already, but the way we get the desired ones more crossing and the
Yeah.
ones we don't
Discernment.
want is to discern.
Fine-tuned discernment. You know, like if you go by a cookie store or something, you're like, I think that's a peanut butter cookie, you know? Or you taste something, you're like, I think this is a little bit of cardamom, you know? Like, you know, that's discernment, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I want to just figure this out, right? So that's why I'm still in my sweatpants today, folks, because, you know, when you're going. So you're like, oh, do I have to put clothes on? Just give me a burlap bag. I don't care. So as we're going through our day, and this is intrapersonal intelligences. We were talking about multiple intelligences before the camera is zinged on. So intrapersonal intelligence means intelligence of yourself, awareness of yourself. Not just necessarily reflections of your actions, but reflections of how does this feel in my body.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So when a timeline memory comes through, it may be very obvious, like, oh, look at me, I feel like I was fighting in the Revolutionary War, you know, or it may not be that obvious, but it's a flow, an overlap of a feeling that then you're like, oof, that does not feel right.
Okay.
And then you make a choice.
Okay.
And it's like, oh, the feel right ones are the ones I want to gobble more of, and the not so right ones I don't want anymore. It's like if you go somewhere to like a potluck and you're like, oh, those, oof, you know, you're like, I am not going back to those cookies. Sorry, you know,
You learn.
Cynthia, but oof, your lemon bars are terrible. But then you go to the one that you like,
Yeah.
right? Then you're like, oh, Bob, these, you know, this tiramisu is like, yeah, you know. You
Right.
can taste it, right?
Okay.
So energy is like, how does it feel in your body, which got taken away from us because
She's on today. Okay.
because through our lives, they're like, don't pay attention to your body. You pay attention to what I say, and you better go to this
Right.
school, or you better
Yeah.
get an A+, or like, right? You're in
Right,
school and you're
right.
like, oh, I better answer the way the teacher wants it. Or you could be like me and kind of
Or
always get in trouble.
We were in robot mode for so long.
Right, so how did
that
you have
you
time?
didn't have really time to tune into your body because
Right.
you were a victim of the next external circumstance and the next external circumstance.
Totally.
And now we're victims of the screen, of just constantly bombarded with technology.
Right, unless
So,
you
yes.
change it. And what I say to people too is like, I have great algorithms. Like my algorithms and cookies, like when I go into Instagram and I look at reels, there's like people dancing. It's like I laugh so hard. I got a lot of comedians on there. However, I have a friend who's like, oh my God, the world, this is terrible. It's like, and then I'm like, well, what do you watch? And she's watching. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta send you. And I'm like sending her like, go to the dancers, go to the comedians, go to like the little kids doing cute stuff. Because it's totally true, actually, to
Well,
the point.
garbage
if
in,
you're
garbage out.
If you're feeding yourself, which is what we're trying to say too, if you're feeding yourself with the negative, intense, harmful timeline stories, even in this timeline, well, that's what you're going to keep rotating. Like, blah,
Right.
Right.
But a
And that's
point-
what the
and
universe will give you.
Agree.
Or you'll
Garbage in,
procreate.
garbage out. But
Right.
but also the point, I was like, it's yet another external stimuli. That
Right.
when you're, Eckhart would often say, if I'm in the grocery line and there's a wait, that's a brilliant opportunity for me to have a mindful moment, to have a moment of just trying to practice some stillness while I'm waiting my turn. But what you end up seeing is people flipping, like, so there's even the stillness of waiting in a line is not stillness anymore. There are much less opportunities for stillness because of technology, as I'm saying. And so
Well, and I mean, I don't think we need stillness that much to know what we like and what we don't like.
I think we need that awareness. I mean, it doesn't have to last for long.
Well, depending upon people's processing skills. Like, I'm pretty quick to know what I like and what I don't like.
I think a lot of people are programmed to just not be in their body. They haven't really taken account of what they like and don't like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that could absolutely be true. Or to get suckered into the chemistry. Remember, chemistry is released.
Yeah, so what
anger,
I read,
rage,
yeah, and I read,
rage,
just was
bliss,
reading,
happiness.
reading a tapping book, 90 seconds. 90 seconds is what it takes for an emotion to be processed. But because we often go on replay, or if to use your analogy, if we're trapped in another timeline, we hang on to it for more than 90 seconds. Right. But given a circumstance, a stimuli that causes a response, then the chemistry and the emotional reaction tied to the chemistry, 90 seconds to get out
then
of
you can
your,
just let it
to
go.
get out of your body.
Exactly.
To get the actual chemistry out of your body.
Unless we keep bringing
But
it
we
up,
keep
which is suffering.
Yeah,
So it's like I say, and Alyssa actually said that when we talked with her about her book, that sorrow, to me, it's going to happen. Your dog gets hit by a car, or sorrow happens. That's this momentary thing. The suffering is when you keep just showing up and keep bringing it up and bringing it up, and it's like, wow, do you want to keep reliving it? It's like talking to people who are maybe hoping to move through trauma, right, of growing up or whatever happened. It's like, okay, here's the thing. That happened to you once. You don't need to keep making it happen to yourself.
Yeah, yes.
Right,
Absolutely.
but there's something that the old, it's comfortable what I know as opposed to what I don't know. And also, as we've talked before, if people had a lot of that around them, they can't know what the other thing is like. If you've never tasted it, if you've never experienced it, you don't know to go for it. You don't know what that will be like. So why would I choose it? I mean,
right. And then just the brain book we're reading together.
Yep.
Just chapter 1, she alludes to that. Whatever section it is in the brain that knows routine and comfort, everything maps to fear.
Right.
And so, because everything is that primal fear, which we needed to know what was safe and what wasn't safe, but there are still mappings in the brain of this is familiar, so therefore it's safe.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Even if it is a familiar, not a pleasant emotion or memory.
But we know
it's
familiar.
familiar.
People sitting in their
Yeah.
And Abraham Hicks talks about that a lot. It's like, you're just sitting in it. It's like, stop walking on the broken glass.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm walking along, this glass is hurting my feet. Well, you can just step over there and you won't be walking on it.
Yeah.
So how do we do that without shame and blame and being embarrassed?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like it just keeps looping around and we break away a little more and break away a little more.
Okay. So this, you feel, is that as a collective is happening more cohesively. Okay.
Yeah. And so I think in any time that we have an expansion, sometimes there's a part of grieving that we'll be alone. There's a knowing that we're separating from the people we love because we're having an expansive awareness. We're moving into a larger reality, perhaps, let's say, right? And so there is sort of a grieving, like, oh, I'm weird, I'm alone, I don't get, they're not going to get it. Even if it's like split second, it's still there. And what I had noticed for years is I would sort of start acting up a little bit about, like, right before I was going to have a, break open. And then I realized that's because I, in part, didn't want to, because I didn't want to feel separated from people. And then I realized once I did, because it was inevitable, the momentum took itself, I realized that then I loved people even more. Because I was less ego attached. I was less like, so on one hand, I was less like, hey, and more like, oh, wow, I totally love you and accept you, and this is really cool.
You don't need to change a thing for me. Yeah.
So I learned over the years to be like, just go for it when it's happening. Just go for it.
Yeah.
But that coming in and feeling lonely is, that can happen, or we feel like we're abandoning people. And that's why I just say, you know what? If we don't create this new world, ascension, high vibration, whatever you want to call it, existence, reality, then when people are ready to pop, like the popcorn kernels, they don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah, you have to model it for yeah.
And create it, actually. Right? We're creating a brand new reality. And again, you often see, like on Star Trek, a little tricky,
We love Star Trek.
that, a lot of that is when they go to other planets or get involved with other cultures, a lot of times it's like, oh, well, why don't you have a hierarchy? Or why does everybody have food? You can just go be like, beep, give me chocolate cake, beep, beep. And the point is, like, we've reached that place where everybody's needs are met.
Right.
So that's where we're going. So everybody's needs are being met. We can't be tugged by weird ego stuff.
Right. Well, and if everybody's needs are being met, there's no competition and there's no lack.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
So
you
right.
can just be.
So if we're taking ourselves away from that slower vibration reality, matrix, whatever you want to call it, that we collectively created, now we're collectively creating something else. We got to get on board, the enterprise there. Like, we got to get there.
I like this way of putting it. I do, because we've been talking about expansion and moving to 5D and the Christ consciousness, but I think this is like another nice way to explain it, the overlapping timeline.
Right, so we can make those choices, and it's real. I mean, it's real and it's beautiful. It's sort of like imagining you're like hugging your favorite sibling or cousin, which is really you, in another timeline. You're like, I want to hang out with that one because we have fun together and we do really cool, positive things together. That's like us with the many versions of us. That's really just vibration.
Right. So you can just summon that vibration.
Exactly.
By summoning the feeling and reverse engineer it.
Yep, and you're choosing it. It's like, it's intention, prayer. I have to say too, and when I post this episode of ours, I saw in one of them that I was sort of, I like made a funny thing and sort of made fun of prayer. And in that one, I didn't mean like the intention, prayer, and the power of being aligned. I meant that sometimes people use prayer as like a begging system.
I agree.
It's a disempowering where they're like, oh, somebody like, help me, because I screwed up.
Desperation. They pray out of desperation instead of just, I'm pre-paving an outcome.
Correct, yes.
And calling in the support of my entourage.
Right, I'm aligning to this highest vibration to say, boost me up in my
as
awareness
opposed to
to
waiting
welcome
till you
this
get
in.
the desperate.
So I realized I did that. I was like, oh, and then people pray, and I'm like, no, that's.
Are
what
we
that
at
meant.
25 minutes, Jonah? We are.
Thanks, Jonah. So prayer, intention, all of that has power, and to visualize and really align. When we're talking to people, we've talked about that before. We're talking to people. It's like, see their best self, and for me, especially in the beginning of my practice, I remember once getting a phone call from a woman I didn't know her. She's like, oh, so-and-so told me to call you, and I've been given 6 months to live, and I have 2 kids. Can you help me?
No pressure.
Right, and I was like, yeah, and then I got off the phone. That's when I had like my, oh my God, but if I showed up like that, that's not, what? How is that helpful? So it's that sort of interesting place of like, I am compassionately involved and committed and engaged with your energetic structure.
Right.
That also includes your humanness.
Yes.
And I'm going to hold that to be its best self. And whether you stay or you go is none of my business. I'm committed to your vibrancy, to your vitality, and what your story is. Right. And that's like it. I don't like jump in my brain like, well, if I do this, it's like, well, no, it's not my place to do that. My place is to see the beautiful vision of the consciousness and the energetic, again, structure.
Right.
Brilliant, complete, and whole. And she actually lived for 2 years.
Aww.
Which is great. Which is great. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So then as we move through a week, wow, this was like, whoo. So I think you pretty much summed it up,
right,
which is just as you move through your day and your week, in addition to the awareness, the intention.
Keep scooping it in, the books, read the comics, the things that
feed yourself
uplifting, because it will remind you, and it will also call to you those times when maybe you were the person that wrote the comic.
Oh, fun.
So it's like, okay, whatever we find ourselves drawn to in our intrapersonal awareness and our discernment of the emotions we want to feel. Juice it up, juice it up. You don't have to make it, tell anybody or make excuses or, it's not about them.
Or
it's about
judge
you.
it about being appropriate or inappropriate if you're feeling called toward.
Be in it. And the more, it's just like they do on, with cookies and algorithms, the more we do it with ourselves personally, the more that's what's going to come to us from our parallel lives, past lives, future lives, every other people. The consciousness, all consciousness will form itself with us in this higher vibration in which we all have all of our needs met.
Boom. Boom. And as always,
More to be revealed.
Thank you for joining us on Expansive Minds podcast, Gateway to Freedom. Until next time, more to be revealed.